It's the Sports Peninsula podcast coming up. We're continuing to analyze the draft prospects for the upcoming 2025 NFL Draft being held in Green Bay this April. In this episode, we'll discuss the prospects at the tight end position. While there's arguably not an elite prospect available this year, this is a very solid group that may include a day one prospect or two. This is a position that the Detroit Lions likely do not need to address in the draft, but we can never rule out any position for any team. We'll discuss some of the top prospects and more next. Now, here is your Sports Peninsula team. And welcome back to the Sports Peninsula podcast. My name is Dave Drzinski Drew. I'm joined by Coach Andy Shield of the Marine City Mariners. We're talking NFL draft prospects, the tight end position for the 2025 draft. Coach, how you doing today?
Doing well, Drew. Just weathering these storms that we've had these last seven or so days, and now the cold has settled in, and old man winter and Mother Nature have decided to do their number on us here these last couple of weeks. But doing well, ready to talk some tight ends. Not so sure that we're really looking at this position with the same kind of eye maybe that we were with offensive line when we talked before, being that Sam Laporta and Brock Wright are kind of locked in as tight end 1 and tight end 2. Tight end 3 is technically something that is kind of open, so I guess if we were looking at something in the draft, it would be in that kind of role. Shane Zylstra has also proven to be a very good tight end 3 and someone that I'm fairly certain that Brad Holmes and company would like to probably take a look at re-signing because he's very well liked in the Lions locker room as well. But nonetheless, I think we've got some players that we'll be featuring here today that are going to be significant players in the NFL someday.
Yeah, it's like we said in the intro, I wouldn't say, and we talked about this off the air before we got on, is there a Brock Bowers in this draft? No, there is not. But it's pretty deep, and there's some really good players that we're going to talk about today and highlight. There could be a day one prospect or two here. What do you think?
Absolutely. There is definitely going to be day one prospects, at least a day one prospect that's going to get selected in the first round out of this position group that we'll get going here in a minute. But there is some depth. There's going to be some players that I think could be real good role kind of package players initially in the NFL, and a lot of tight end 2 type candidates. But we have a couple of tight end 1s as well, and guys that could be significant impact players early in their careers.
Yeah. And before we jump into that, I want to thank everybody first for tuning in. Love the feedback we're getting on the on the prospect show so far. Don't forget to hit the like button. So make sure you're subscribed. And we got this every week coming out. We got content every week. We're previewing every prospect group up to the first round, which I believe is April 24th on a Thursday. We'll have a mock first round draft prior to that, but we'll have every position group highlighted. Now, Coach, we haven't had the combine yet, and we haven't had the pro days yet. So, we're still kind of going off just film and scouting reports and what we've seen so far. And this is another group that always seems to benefit from the combine and the pro days. So that's going to be interesting as well. But let's jump into it. Let's talk about the top 20 guys that you're looking at right now, Coach.
Well, yeah, going from bottom right to upper left, and number 20 is C.J. Dippre out of Alabama. Big, strong, kind of inline type tight end. Lions might have an eye on a guy like that, possibly on day 3 or into the undrafted territory. At 19, Gavin Bartholomew at Pittsburgh kind of put a show on there the day after Christmas at Ford Field at the marathon known as the Game Above Bowl, the longest bowl game in NFL or in NCAA history. Gavin Bartholomew was a big player in that game. 18, Malachi Mataveo out of UCLA. Got to see him a little bit more this past year since he joined the Big Ten. Guy that's been on a couple of boards. Believe he was a top 20 tight end prospect last year, and Bryson Nesbitt out of North Carolina in at 17. Followed by another guy on the Lions radar, and we know so because it has been reported by Lions Beat that they have looked at Jalen Conyers a little bit at Texas Tech as a guy that could fulfill a role on the team. And at 15, Brant Keith out of Utah. Good-looking prospect there. At 14, Caden Pricecorn out of Ole Miss. Ben Urosek out of Georgia in at 13. At 12, this is a guy that the Lions really like because of his blocking prowess. might be the best blocker in all of the draft. That's Jackson Hawes of Georgia Tech in at 12. And at 11, guy I saw with our own eyes, might be talking about him here in a little bit, and that is Mr. Luke Lachey, a blue blood generational football player, or second generational football player out of Iowa. Bringing to our top 10, Jake Brenningstool out of Clemson. Guy's played a lot of football for the Tigers, a lot of big games. Another intriguing prospect in at 9, Oronde Gadsden II out of Syracuse. Big, tall guy. Really, he's played a lot of wide receiver in his career. It'll be fun to follow him a little bit here. And at 8, we'll be featuring these guys, all of these players. Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame, a guy that is very, very similar to Brock Wright. Could be somebody that the Lions would look at potentially there if we were looking at a day 2 tight end. Terrence Ferguson in at 7 out of Oregon, and at 6, Elijah Arroyo, guy that doesn't have a lot of tread in his tire, suffered from some injuries, but boy, is he an athlete. Into our top 5, another big-time blue blood football player with all sorts of genetic background for this game, Mason Taylor out of LSU, son of NFL Hall of Famer Jason Taylor and nephew of NFL Hall of Famer Zach Thomas. At 4, Gunnar Helm out of Texas. Got to see a lot of him this year. A great and intriguing prospect out of Canton, Ohio, and out of the Mid-American Conference, Drew. Bowling Green State University Falcons' own Harold Fannin Jr. Going to be talking about him, really looking at that's going to be fun. And he has been prolific. Really, statistically, the greatest year for a tight end in college football history. In at number 2, somebody we know very well here from the 2023 NCAA national champions and a real great run here at tight end for Michigan, and that's Colston Loveland. He is in at number 2, and he is one of those guys that potentially could be a day 1 selection and a guy that's an early package to starting tight end. And in at number 1 is the guy I think that is kind of a lock for being a day 1 prospect and an early, probably tight end 1, and a guy that has a lot of early ceiling to him, and a player that could really be, if things work out, quite good in the NFL, and that's Tyler Warren from Penn State, our number 1 tight end on the big board for 2025.
Yeah, and let's talk about Tyler Warren, Coach. Let's give us a little background. Yeah, he's a Virginia native out of Mechanicsville, all-state in football and baseball in high school, football, basketball, and baseball background. He's the Mackey Award winner in 2024 this season. He had 1,230 yards receiving last year in college for Penn State. Excellent year. 26 career touchdowns, 153 career receptions. And oh, by the way, he's got some speed, 4.68 40 time. Coach, that's nothing to sneeze at when you're 6'6", 261 pounds. This is a great football player, senior Tyler Warren. What do you like about him?
What do you think he played in baseball? I mean, I think it's fair to say he gained 30 to 35 pounds probably since he's been at Penn State. So he probably was like 225. Probably a big old outfielder, first baseman.
Corner outfielder, first baseman. Yep, absolutely.
Well, he's an athlete, Drew. He does possess kind of that profile of a Sam Laporta, Hawkinson type profile, Kittle type profile. Dangerous in all alignments. He can put his hand down in line. You can stretch him out. You can use him as a motion guy, as like an H-back. You can do a lot of different things. He's got, he can get vertical up the field, and that's big today. A lot of teams want to have that vertical tight end as a true field stretcher as a receiver, just like you would have on the outside and from the inside. And that's something that Tyler Warren proved he could do very easily at the Big Ten level. He's a former quarterback, so he understands kind of play concepts, route concepts. He understands passing windows. He understands coverages, and he can kind of sense and see that. So there's little nuances there that Tyler Warren used, at Penn State that he'll continue to obviously use throughout his NFL career that are going to really benefit him in getting open, Drew. And that is one of them right there. He's a guy that's a rambling rock after the football, or after he catches the football. He's a big-time yards after catch producer or yak producer. Big, competitive, energetic guy. Somebody that's fun to be around, kind of a glue guy, a chemistry guy. He's a red zone wizard. The last couple of years, especially for Penn State, they really, really, and it showed as how good of a year that they had this year, especially. He was a major feature in scoring touchdowns for them or getting plays deep within the red zone. Great at the 50-50 balls and contested catches. Very dynamic and competitive athlete that can be used a lot of different ways. Not quite like Brock Bowers, but not dissimilar either. He's a little bigger than Brock Bowers. He's a little bigger than that. He is more Laporta sized. But I think you are looking at a guy that if he is probably playing at his highest level, Drew, is probably similar to a Sam Laporta. This is a good tight end. This is the one that's the most ready to compete, in my estimation. And I just watched it with my own eyes as a Big Ten football enthusiast and college football enthusiast, and just saw what he's able to do and saw him block and looked at the different ways he was featured. I like Tyler Warren an awful lot. He is going to get drafted on day one. Drew, some things, though, that might be of interest. However, what might they be?
Yeah, so needs to become a route seller. Basically, and it's, I mean, you could say like you're faking out the guy that's covering you. Where, yeah, or you've got to be able to sell. If you're going to do an out and in or whatever, you've got to be able to sell that. And so he's got to get a little better at that. He's going to have to cut his teeth as a blocker initially. And this is where I think I'm hesitant to say, I agree with you. He could be like Laporta, but he's got to show he can block at that kind of a level. We thought TJ Hawkinson, as Lions fans, was going to be that. He's a tremendous pass catching tight end. He's an average blocker. We thought he was going to be an elite blocker. So nothing's guaranteed in that regard. So that's something Tyler Warren's got to he's going to have to cut his teeth on it, like we said. He's got to become a next level route runner. So again, now you got to be able to sell those routes. He's gonna have. I know he's got the acumen and IQ to understand his route tree, etc. But again, he's going to have to become a next level route runner to live up to this potential, because physically he's got the skills. He's not a devastating blocker. Now, does he have to be? Not necessarily, but he's got to be an effective blocker. And he can struggle with heavy-handed edges and outside linebackers and DBs. So he's got to be careful of that. And guess what? Most guys in the NFL that are blitzing are going to be like that in some regard. So he's going to have to get pro strong. We'll probably hear a lot about that. Every player's got to make that step up to the next level. Tyler Warren has, I'll be honest with you, I don't see a lot of buyer bewares here. I just see things that maybe would prevent him from being mentioned with the Kelce's and Mark Andrews and Sam Laportas of the world in another 3-4 years. But I think at the very least, we're going to be saying Tyler Warren is knocking on the door of a potential Pro Bowl annually, as long as he can shore these things up. He's a very good player, Coach. I agree with you. Any last thoughts on Tyler Warren?
Oh, I think you hit the nail around the head with him. I think, his learning curve is going to be a little bit less. Probably, as a blocker, even less than the guy that we're going to feature next. With that, with being said that, is it going to take him 1 to 2 years to acclimate as a blocker in the NFL? No, I think it could take him 1 to 2 months. For some other guys, that might be 1 to 2 years. So that he's got going for him. And yes, he's just got to use the route running and the selling of the routes as his feature, as the thing that he brings to the table that makes him an upper level pro now. So those other elements to his game develop. We're talking about the player that we said that his ceiling could be.
Now, here's the next guy we're going to talk about is number 1 on some folks' boards, and certainly early on in the mock draft process. It's out of the University of Michigan. Coach, introduce him.
Colston Loveland, 6'5", 245-pound junior out of the Maize and Blue University of Michigan. Guy that's started since played a lot as a true freshman, but was the starter and a big linchpin piece of the offense on the 2023 national championship team, and was a captain, kind of leader on this 8-5 2024 Michigan team that really despite that record, really achieved a lot, especially towards the end of that season. He was a four-star player, four-star recruit that Coach Jim Harbaugh got out of the state of Idaho. He's from the Gem State, Gooding, Idaho. He was all-state in football and basketball, where we talk about Tyler Warren being football, baseball guy. Colston was a football, basketball guy in high school. Was a 2024 All-American, two-time All-Big Ten selection. Like we said before, he was a member of key piece of the 2023 National Championship team, 117 career receptions. He's played in all 42 games he's dressed with that winged helmet on. So this is Colston Loveland is a highly revered, dare we say, era-driven legend of Michigan football.
Yeah, he's a really good one. He's a really good one. Let's talk about what we like about him. And I'll start that one off. He's a tremendous natural athlete. And Coach, you touched on it earlier that, to be in high school All-American in football and basketball, got to be an athlete. And he's definitely that. A plus route runner. This is something Colston Loveland excels at. And I'll tell you what, he stood out favorably this year. Obviously the team the program took a bit of a step back. They lost a lot of talent off that national title team. Colston Loveland was one of the most consistent offensive players on the team. They got better as the year went on. Colston Loveland was always a constant. He's alignment versatile, meaning he can put his hand in the dirt and be in line. He can also go outside or in the slot. That's important, very important for a tight end. That basketball background, it's very evident when you have 50-50 situations. He's 6'5", 245, and he's got some hops. He's got great hands. He's got a big, wide catching radius, and he's tough to tackle after the catch. And that's a key. You'll see a lot of tight ends that can make big plays and big catches, but then as soon as they turn around, they get taken right out the legs. Colston Loveland's a little better than that. You got to bring a little bit more than that to bring him down. He's a dangerous vertical threat. So he's not just a possession type guy. He can stretch the field a little bit, and if you give him any space, he can make you pay. There's so much to like about Colston Loveland, and I think, Coach, because he's a plus route runner and really has shown he's really almost an elite pass receiving tight end at this point already. That's why a lot of people have him even above Warren, but there are some things he needs to work on. There's some watch-outs. Let's talk about those.
Well, right out of the gates, he's really got to take that route running and make that his feature. Yeah. That's going to be the thing that he can really hang his hat on throughout his career, that he was an outstanding route runner and he was able to get separation that way and get open and be a productive pass-catching tight end. He's dropped the football a little bit. It was especially early on in his career. And there was a little bit of quarterback instability at times this year where a lot of these catches that were maybe dubbed as drops were really kind of challenges more on his catch radius, if anything, which is pretty good. So maybe these weren't necessarily bad, weren't the greatest passes in the world either. But he's got a little bit more of a drop profile, to him than maybe Tyler Warren does. But he's also targeted a little bit more early in his career, knowing the way that Coach Jim Harbaugh especially wanted to throw the football. He's got to work to become an NFL-capable blocker. That's where his learning curve, and I guess the race to overtake Tyler Warren as the top tight end in this draft is something that you can't probably prove in your pro day or at the combine. It's only can be done on film and can only be done live and in color, and is which one's going to, climb the ladder faster in their learning curve as a blocker of this league. I think for Colston Loveland, that could be a little bit of a longer stretch for him. Just, got to put on a little bit more functional mass and strength. He's 6'5", 245. We're talking, Tyler Warren 6'6", 260 already. Yeah. So, he's got to get a little bit more mass there. He is definitely a better receiver than a pass protector. And you know what? I mean, if you're going to have Colston Loveland in the game, you want to keep him in the pass. That might be a situational thing, but that's something that really, he's not a guy that you want to leave in and keep in pass protection. I don't know if you want to do that anyway, because he's a pretty good receiver. So, there are some tight ends, some of which, we may or may not talk about today, that are good pass protectors. That's something that Colston Loveland is not a forte of his. The NFL physicality could be an adjustment for him. Could be a little bit of an adjustment for him. Not that he's not a willing, physical, aggressive football player. He certainly is. and he's a very dynamic athlete, and it's going to be just fine, Drew. But there's going to be maybe a little bit more of a learning curve when it comes to that side of things at tight end for him to be the complete player that he could be, which is also potentially a Pro Bowl caliber tight end.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I mean, there's an outside chance Colston Loveland could go day one. I mean, it's going to be situational. It'd be later in the day, but it could happen. And quite like I said earlier, there were several early mocks that had him going above Warren. I think that's shifted a little bit more to what we've got here. But yeah, so much to like about Colston Loveland, Coach. Great job covering him. Let's go to our number 3 prospect. I'll take this one, Coach. I love the MAC. We're Western Michigan Broncos, but we love talking about the MAC. We'll talk about Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end out of Bowling Green State University, 6'4", 230-pound junior out of Canton, Ohio. And you got to love that. Pro Football Hall of Fame, home of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Football and baseball stand out in high school. Again, another 2-sport athlete in high school. And he had one of the most prolific seasons in D1 history this past season, 1,555 yards, NCAA record for tight ends, All-American in 2024, 2-time All-MAC, had 117 receptions in 2024, and get this, 22 career touchdowns from the junior, Harold Fannin Jr. Coach, there's just so much to like about Harold Fannin Jr. Break down what some of the things you saw.
Colston Loveland had 117 career receptions. Harold Fannin had 117 this year. So that just goes to show you the type of season this guy had.
Yeah,
he was an absolute monster. And Coach Scott Loeffler of the University of Michigan, his head coach at Bowling Green, did a great job of featuring him and getting him the football and really, really leading and scheming through their tight end. And they, it worked quite well for them. They were, a couple years of bowls and things went really good. He's, a good solid run base as a blocker, which now he proved that. He proved that at the MAC level, but he did do this. This is something that they had him play in line there, and he did a nice job with it. So he's proven himself to be solid at that level. An absolute just vacuum of catching that football. I mean, he has got great hands and great tracking ability. Could be the best in the draft. He doesn't quite have the length and body of some guys, but he's 6'4", 230. We're not talking about a little guy either. He's a muse for a creative offensive guy. Ben Johnson gets a hold of a player like this.
Oh boy,
this is the type of player that creative guys like that like to have and do different things with. He's tough. He didn't hardly ever leave the field. There were he was never subbed out. Regardless of the rigor of the game. He never was taken out early. Another warrior with the football in his hands. A yard after catch, just extraordinaire. He is a route seller, which that's something that shouldn't be undersold. That's something that has to take place at the pro level. That's how guys get open. It has to be conceptually done. The whole thing has to work. And that, by being a route seller, you may help another guy score, which means you scored too on the offense and your team scored. And he does those kinds of things. So those are the things that kind of elevated the Bowling Green Falcon, team to having some pretty successful seasons with Harold Fannin Jr. in there at tight end. He's a real fluid, athletic, explosive, athletic guy, and can get vertical and make plays down the field, Drew. If we were going to do something kind of out of the ordinary, this is the type of a player I would do that with. Yeah. If somehow he was there at 60 and we want to do something kind of, we're going to be doing something different on off. We're going to use him if we're doing that.
Oh, yeah.
That Brock Wright might be he might be the tight end 3, but he could be a type of a guy that I would think about doing something like that with. Drew, what are some things though that are working against Harold Fannin Jr.?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, you naturally say, okay, we just talked about 2 Big Ten guys. Now we're talking about a MAC guy. So, it's not a Power 5 conference, not a Power 5 school, Bowling Green. So he's a scheme tight end at Bowling Green. So is that a weakness? Well, no, it's just it's a flag to say, okay, we know he was very good at what he did, but we need to see more. Can he do other things? So there's kind of that gray area, and general managers, coaches, and OCs are gonna have to get that figured out. Personally, I think he's gonna be good, and no matter what you line him up in, he's kind of proven that. But again, it's not a given. You got to make sure we understand that he's big time undersized for heavy duty inline use. So yeah, 6'4", nice height, but 230 pounds. I mean, I know it sounds like I'm splitting hairs here, but honestly, I mean, you'd really, if you're going to have an inline tight end, like 50% of the time, you'd really like to have about 245, 250 pounds on you to be able to handle that. Because the guys you're going to be facing on the edge are at minimum are going to be weighing 240, and they're lightning fast. So that's something. Maybe if he's very, because he's a scheme tight end in that regard. Maybe if you're a power run team, maybe this isn't necessarily the direction you look in, but lots to like here, of course. And he's not seen the most dynamic competition level yet. So again, he's from the MAC. We get it. Now they play big time schools. Don't get me wrong. I mean, heck, Coach, when our Broncos went to the Cotton Bowl in 2016, they had to beat Illinois and Northwestern. They did so.
Right.
So
well, that first clip that showed him scoring a touchdown against Penn State.
There you go. So, he's obviously played against some elite competition, but not every Saturday, right? So, and in some cases on Tuesdays in the MAC, of course. Going to struggle as a power point of attack blocker. That's just not his forte, and it's not his physical skill set. So again, that's really why Harold Fannin Jr. is number 3 on our board, because as a pass catcher, there's not much to be concerned about. And again, he can have difficulty with super aggressive coverage. So if you're going to face Harold Fannin Jr., you're likely going to be making sure you're getting a piece of him on the line, or you're standing him up at a line, getting a chip on him so that you can kind of disrupt him a bit. That's how you got to get him, because if he can get out in space, he's going to sell the routes like you said earlier, Coach, and he's going to make plays. I'll tell you what, I'd be inclined to believe to be in line with what you're saying for the Lions, but I'm just hesitant because they have a lot invested in Brock Wright as a number 2, and obviously Sam Laporte is clearly, he's one of the best tight ends in football. But man, I like Harold Fannin Jr. a lot. Coach, any final thoughts on Harold Fannin Jr.?
You're right, Drew. We need to do other things with that draft capital at that spot. It's just not the fit in draft. But heck yeah, you would love to have Harold Fannin Jr., but he's going to go to someone's team, and I think he's going to be a substantive player next year as a sub-package tight end offensive threat. Is a guy that could have ultimately eventually be, once he gets his pro strength, to be a tight end 1. And a guy that's kind of Gates-like, so to speak. I mean, at his ceiling. So really like him as a prospect. He's a lot of fun to watch on YouTube, folks. Take a look at Harold Fannin Jr. On to our 4th selection.
Yeah, you got to take it, Coach.
Yes, thank you there, Drew. We will be talking about a guy down in the Lone Star State, Gunnar Helm, University of Texas, product 6'5", 250-pound senior. They got him from Englewood, Colorado there, outside of Denver. He was another two-sport guy. He was a football, basketball standout in high school. He's played in all 54 games he's dressed for the Longhorns. So a real statesman and a well-served seasoned veteran. That also tells you he's pretty durable, too, for the Longhorns. 2023 All Big 12 selection. 2024 All SEC selection. So he's gotten to be a guy that is, somewhat prolific, because there's a few guys at Texas, a few guys at Oklahoma that can say they played in both conferences, just like there's a few guys at UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington that played in both the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. So he had success at the highest level in both. 7 TDs in 2024, so he was featured a little bit in his last year with the Longhorns. 60 receptions in 2024. So this was his big year, and he showed out. He got the opportunity and showed out, and here he is. Climbing the ladder is probably a pretty solid lock for day 2.
Yeah, there is so much to like about Gunnar Helm, Coach. I'll talk about that right now. Gunnar Helm's a very good route runner, flat out. He's very good. He's got great hands. This guy's a football addict. So he's one of those guys. He's the first guy in the weight room. He's the last guy to leave. He's the first guy in the practice field. He's taking extra reps afterwards. He's a worker, loves the game. And obviously, if you got a guy like that, that's a guy you want to invest in. Great character and work ethic. Again, that just illustrated that. Alignment versatile. Again, he can be in line, he can go outside, he can be in the slot. So that's a huge plus for any tight end. He has a good long and sturdy frame for the NFL. He's 6'5", 250. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility he could add even 10 pounds of muscle on that frame. But I mean, he's already a big guy. But yeah, he's got what you want in the NFL for being able to handle the physicality he's going to face as a tight end. He's and another one of these guys, a yak monster. You give him any kind of space or real estate to work with after the catch, he's going to hurt you. And he's a high character guy. Again, when you love the game and you're that dedicated to your craft, that speaks to your character. There's no question about that. Gunnar Helm is a top-notch player and an individual. Coach, what does he have to work on to be successful in the NFL?
Well, he's played in 54 games, so he's played in every single game he's ever dressed for Texas, but he's really been limited to 1 year as a starter, which was this year. But he showed out during that time, so really he answered the bell there. But he is limited in that regard. He might not quite be the athlete that Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland is, or Harold Fannin Jr. is for that matter. A little bit more of the size profile as Warren and Loveland, not quite the athletic profile as those guys.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to get pro strong, which is going to be something he's going to have to be featured because he's going to be an in-line guy. He is definitely going to be someone that has his hand in the dirt, and he has to become more technical in that regard. So he's got to be really feature himself as a blocker and say, you know what, doggone it, I'm as good of a blocker as there was in my draft class at tight end. I'm the best one, in fact. Well, he could hang his hat on that. Yeah. And that's something that he would probably work towards. So these really are things that we say that are weaknesses that really, in many ways, Drew, are moments of opportunity for Gunnar Helm to really make him be the signature of his play style as a pro. And that's being a great inline blocker. Can he get vertical in the NFL? Well, if he can't, he can make a living for a long time as an inline blocker. So he's got to really feature that part of him. But he's not quite the athlete these other guys are. And he really speaks to being maybe more of a pedestrian tight end one at the ceiling, or a solid tight end one at the ceiling, but definitely a long-time tight end two or a combo tight end for sure.
I think, Coach, based on we're projecting him probably like maybe a day two guy, a later day two guy. I think for his draft slotting, he may be the safest pick of the group just because you're going to get, what you're going to get from him and you're going to get good value with that pick. So Gunnar Helm is going to be a very solid pro, like you said, for many years. And he could end up being a very solid number one as well. Lots to like about him. We'll talk about the next guy we got here, our number 5 prospect coach, and that is Mason Taylor out of LSU, 6'5", 255-pound junior. He's from Plantation, Florida. He's the son of Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. You mentioned that earlier when we did the top 20. And again, the nephew of NFL Hall of Famer Zach Thomas. He's the most productive tight end in LSU history. I'm going to say that again. The most productive tight end in LSU history. 2024 All-SEC member, 2022 freshman All-SEC, and had 129 career receptions for the Tigers. Man, there's a lot to like about Mason Taylor, Coach. And let's talk about some of the things you saw.
Well, I mean, he's an NFL blue blood. I mean, his dad is an NFL Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And his dad was a tremendously athletic defensive end outside linebacker, kind of redefined the edge from a physical athletic profile in a lot of ways. His dad was a trendsetter that way. Yeah. And he's got a very similar body at 6'5", 255. He's also, his mom is the sister of Zach Thomas, the Pro Bowl Hall of Fame linebacker from the Dolphins.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's got some real good football genes in him. He's an extremely good receiver. extremely good, excellent hands, another yards after catch warrior. Just great with the football, true weapon as a tight end at LSU. We talk a lot about of LSU wide receivers. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham. We can keep on going down the line. Brian Thomas Jr. This is a tight end that really was a featured offensive weapon as a receiver there. He's alignment versatile with the requisite speed to be that way. You don't get to play SEC football and move around the formation without it. Made a lot of big plays in big games and big situations. Clutch player, guy they relied on. He was a go-to guy. Wasn't just an outside receiver or someone, burning up the slot, or getting vertical out of the slot. It was, the tight end, these last, year and a half for LSU. Jaden Daniels, featured him a lot as a quarterback for LSU. He can be a high target pass receiver in the NFL. He could be a guy that emerges as a tight end one in an offensive scheme that might not demand so much from him as a blocker, and be a guy that kind of is a volume target receiver. Very fluid athlete. He's a 50-50 ball winner. Drew, Mason Taylor is an interesting prospect.
Yeah.
There are a few things, though, that probably take him out of that same picture of Warren and Loveland and Fannin. What are some of those concerns?
Yeah, Coach. And the first thing is that he's going to have that NFL learning curve as a blocker. I had trouble really kind of pinpointing like how long do we really think that's going to be? What were your thoughts on that real quick? How long do you think it's going to take him? A season?
It all depends. It all depends how you respond to the physicality. For some guys, they can pick things up pretty quickly, and it may take them, only weeks to months.
Yeah.
Where by the end of the year, he's really kind of catching up pretty good to where in year 2 he's there. There are some that it may kind of click in halfway through, like a second year. And there are some that it never quite adapts. So, it just kind of, that's where the demands of Mason Taylor are going to be more. And that will be that of a blocker. But it's kind of hard to say exactly what that timeline could be for a guy like him. Yeah,
and it makes a lot of sense, Coach. He needs to refine his route running. And we've said that about most of the prospects we're talking about. Very few are coming in, like a Fannin Jr. that are really very good at that already. Not to say Warren and Loveland aren't, but again, there's just a little bit more work that needs to be done. Same with Mason Taylor. He's been used primarily as a possession tight end and not as much as a vertical threat. Thing is, he possesses a lot of traits that could make him that kind of a player. I guess it's going to depend on the scheme that he's in and whoever drafts him, but there's potential there. But the fact of the matter is he wasn't used that way at LSU. So he's going to have to show that to whoever drafts him, or either at the combine, at his pro day, and at training camp. He's got to commit to being a pro blocker. I've never heard anything to suggest that he wouldn't be. But again, he's got to show that he's willing to do that. It's one thing to talk about. It's another thing to do it. Not a big touchdown threat, TD threat, or a red zone threat at LSU. So, that's a situation where I'll be honest with you. That actually surprised me because of his size and the fact that he's kind of guy that wins those 50-50 balls. If I'm an OC in the NFL, I'm going to definitely look at trying to get Mason Taylor to be that kind of a guy when I get him on my team. But can he separate at the NFL level? So he's alignment versatile at requisite speed, but is that speed going to be enough to show that he can separate at the NFL level? We're going to find out. I think, Coach, that Mason Taylor is the type of player that will benefit greatly from a strong combine and pro day. We see the tape. We know he's a very good player, but if he can show the athleticism, that could shore up a lot of these weaknesses we're looking at right here. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Drew. I think you're absolutely right. I think that is kind of where the rubber meets the road with Mason Taylor. If he really does do well and those athletic intangibles kind of pop, it could slot him up, right up there and kind of make him a third, high level guy. Because if he is able to prove himself with his hand in the ground and as an inline blocker, and if he can prove himself as a blocker, this is a tight end one. This is a tight end one. This is a starting tight end if he can prove those things, because he's so sure-handed and ready-handed, and because you weren't a red zone threat do think about some of the players he has played football with as receivers too, and Butte and Brian Thomas and some of these other guys, and so and Malik Neighbors. So, there were some other guys that he's played with, to say he wasn't a red zone threat, that might not necessarily be a strike against him fully. He did play with some pretty doggone good teammates too. But I think the guy proves himself as a blocker, Drew. He's a tight end one.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Coach. Let's talk about our next prospect, number 6 tight end prospect. Take it away.
Yeah, we're talking about Elijah Arroyo out of the University of Miami down in Florida, Coral Gables. 6'4", 245-pound junior. 4-star recruit out of Frisco, Texas. He played for Independence High School, Drew. That is a big-time program. I think he was a 4-year varsity letter winner there. That's saying something, because you have to be a pretty doggone good football player to play varsity 4 years in a program like that. Lost a lot of time to injury, down in Coral Gables. He's only played 19 games. So we're talking about a very, very limited sample size for a guy to climb the ladder of this magnitude. It speaks to his ability as a prospect and some of the things that we will be talking about here shortly. He was 2024 All-ACC. He played most of his games this year. This was the year he really got on the field. And this year he was targeted 47 times. He made 35 receptions. So it was successful in that regard. 7 TDs this year. So 7 of those 35 receptions were touchdowns this year. So guy that's a really, really good athlete, Drew.
Yeah. Well, what we like about him, Coach, this is another guy, yards after catch threat, yak threat, and the athleticism's there on tape. You can see it. I mean, and 6'4", 245, but man, he's a great athlete. Very high potential player. Again, the only 19 career games, and yet we're talking about it as our number 6 prospect. There's a reason for that. This guy's a very, very good football player. He's a blue chip prospect, and he understands the expectation, and he has an understanding of an expectation load. He understands what's expected of him. He understands what he needs to be, and he understands his place on his team. He's expected to be a go-to guy, and he's definitely one of those guys. He's alignment versatile. Again, he can go outside. He can put his hand in the dirt. He can do a lot of things. He's outstanding in vertical route alignments. We talked about some guys that we weren't sure about. Could they stretch the field like that? Elijah Arroyo definitely can do that. So he's a big play receiver, and in limited action, he's shown that. Like you talked about earlier, Coach, 35 catches, 7 of those were touchdowns. This guy can make plays. He possesses the speed to be that vertical NFL threat. It's already there. We already saw it on tape. And he's fluid, and he's relaxed. He's got sure hands. He's a smooth athlete. He's a pleasure to watch play football. He's so smooth. Again, but the injuries are the issue here, Coach. Let's talk about some of the concerns.
Well, he's inexperienced. He's inexperienced at playing at the higher level. I mean, he's only got 19 games under his belt. We're talking about Gunnar Helm's got 54. Colson Loveland 42. He's played 19. So he's been oft injured throughout his career. And he tore that left knee was a catastrophic knee injury. He was torn ACL, and it was reconstructive in 2022. So this is a guy that's had some work done on that body already. He does not quite have the seasoning as some of these other prospects have. I mean, if you think about that, I mean, Gunnar Helm has almost played 3 times more of the football games at the college level that Elijah Arroyo has.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the seasoning level that he has. And, of the time that Elijah Arroyo wasn't able to even practice, let alone play in games. It's just got to be behind the 8 ball when it comes to technique and some of the skills to play the tight end position. He's not the best with his hand in the dirt yet. And that may never quite be a forte, although he does have the potential to grow in that capacity. He's not very polished as a blocker. That's not to say that he's a soft football player and is not willing, but it's not very, very technical at this point in time. And the $1 million question is going to be, Drew, can he stay healthy?
Yeah, literally.
Can he physically handle playing at this level at all, and not be a guy that's completely on the injury report? Because if he is able to stay healthy and all of his bad luck happened in college, he could be a guy that's like meteoric in his ability to ascend into being perhaps the most productive tight end in this draft class, at least early on. But I think those injury concerns and the law of averages are going to tell us that Elijah Arroyo is going to spend some time on the injury report.
Yeah, and that's why it's so hard to really gauge where he's going to go. He's got the talent to go early.
Day 2 for sure.
Yeah. But I see him more as a late day 2 guy, but could be an absolute diamond in the rough to get a guy like this in day 2 in the 3rd round. And then all of a sudden you're talking about in 5 years, maybe 3 Pro Bowl appearances.
Right.
I would hope for his sake it happens. But the injuries are a concern. Again, whoever drafts him is going to have to do a lot of homework and look at those medical reports and make sure things are good and make sure they like what they see on the field now and what they like on tape. When he's played, he's been outstanding. There's just no question about that. When the guy plays, he's a threat. So that
day 1 talent, day 3 injury profile.
Yeah, that's it. And which subsequently probably equals a day 2 draft slot. So hope the best for Elijah Arroyo, coach. On to our number 7 prospect out of the University of Oregon, Terrence Ferguson, 6'5", 255-pound senior, hails from Littleton, Colorado. This is another guy. Remember, we saw him in the Pac-12, and then they moved to the Big Ten. Well, he was an all Pac-12 and all Big Ten player. So this is a guy that can play football, and he's certainly a very good tight end. He had 13 touchdowns between 2021 and 2023. He's got 16 career touchdowns. He's the most productive tight end in Oregon history. Again, here we got another prospect that's leading the way in the history of his program. The University of Oregon's a big-time program. Terrence Ferguson statistically is the best they've produced to this point. Over 1,500 career receiving yards. There's a lot to like about Terrence Ferguson, coach. Let's talk about what you do like in his game.
You're going to play offense in a place like Oregon and with pace and then that kind of thing. You've got to have really good, precise route skills, and he has them. That's what led to his productivity, as a player there. He got vertical both in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. So he's an athlete. He can run, he can move, he can get up the field. And what I think is most said that we have not talked about a lot of prospects here, Drew, is he is a committed blocker. He's very technical. He's shown some good things. He's a very competitive inline blocker. And that is refreshing to see because there's some other ones that are too. But he probably can block right at their level already. So that bodes very well for Terrence Ferguson's prospects in Green Bay this April.
Yeah.
Another guy that's alignment versatile, can move all over the place, can be motioned around, can align in the slot, can get widened. He can be, in line. It can be used as an H-back, all those different things. Long, lean, but wide frame suited for NFL tight end. He's got that body type. We talked, if you really think about that, 6'5", 250, 6'5", 255. We've talked about that player physical profile a lot today already. He's yet another one that kind of, has that physical frame. He's long strider, suited for separation. That's how he can get vertical. He's got a real good, long, fluid stride. Very sure-handed plus athlete. This guy's good to go, Drew. He's good to go. This is a guy that's definitely getting drafted, definitely making an NFL football team. What are some things that need to happen for Terrence Ferguson?
Well, he needs to get to be a pro strong blocker. And obviously being a committed technical blocker, being a guy that lines up in line, I don't see that as being a long-term concern by any means with him. But it's true of any prospect. You got to show it you can handle the bigger, stronger, faster pass rushers you're going to be facing in the NFL. He had difficulty blocking those higher level edges and defensive ends in college. So it's a legitimate, I would say not concern, but it's a legitimate thing he needs to work on. But this guy's so coachable and so athletic. I don't think it's going to take long. But if anything might hold him back in year one, that might be it. Can lose his feet in the run game a little bit. So that can be a concern too, especially if you're asking him to be that inline blocker. He's going to have to maintain his anchor and his balance. That's going to be very important. He can lose his route focus and pass detail as he wears down. So if fatigue comes into play, we see a little bit of that. That can be coached out, but it's something they got to work on with him. He does not feature good NFL tight end speed. So here's the thing. I think, again, he's going to have to show out at the combine and pro day, and I think that'll help him out a lot. But on tape, you can see that he's not quite like, we're not talking about Harold Fannin Jr. here. We're not talking about Mason Taylor here. You know, Ferguson's a little bit different. He needs some developmental and adjustment time. So he's not necessarily going to go in and start day one. However, the value that this guy has, I mean, there's a lot to like about him. But again, it might not be in year one. And if you need that immediate impact, Terrence Ferguson might not be the guy you're looking at the draft. But if you want someone that's going to be there for the long haul, Terrence Ferguson absolutely is. He's got enough. Is he got enough to stick beyond a tight end 3 role? Well, then there's the key. If he can address these concerns, Coach, absolutely. Tight end 2, maybe even tight end 1. But at the very least, this is going to be a very competent, serviceable, very dependable tight end in the NFL. Just might not be a star splash guy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think if he can prove those things to not be weaknesses, he's going to play a lot. He'll play a lot early and be one of these kind of steal type candidates. Terrence Ferguson definitely possesses that potential, but the likelihood of him being kind of a process tight end, he's not necessarily a donkey tight end where he's just in there to be a blocker, but he might be more of what is like a process tight end and a guy that bounces around a little bit before he finds his niche. But he has definitely got the skills to contribute at this level and then contribute for probably 5+ years.
Yeah, definitely going to be I think probably an early day 3 pick. Would you say, Coach, roughly?
He's that tweener 2-3 guy.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about our number 8 prospect. Coach, take it away.
We're talking about Mitchell Evans. We saw a lot of him, especially late into the season, with the Fighting Irish of the University of Notre Dame. 6'5", 260-pound senior. A Midwestern guy from Wadsworth, Ohio, another two-sport or multi-sport athlete, excelled in football and baseball in high school, was also, a QB and a punter. That's what, are primary positions in high school. So it's kind of a different type of an athlete. Played in 45 games for the Fighting Irish, 77 career receptions, and was really Riley Leonard's clutch receiving target in 2024 when it came to 3rd down completions and 4th down completions.
Well, we'll talk about what we like about Mitchell Evans here. He's a tough physical player, Coach. No question about that. You watch the tape. You watched him in the playoff. He's a tough player. This is a football player. He operates the middle of the field with confidence. He's got his head up. He's not afraid to make the tough catches up the middle. Very important, especially in the NFL. Intelligent, intuitive athlete. He's a smart guy. He's got great football IQ. He knows what he's doing. He understands defense and what he's seeing. His dynamic football skills really allow for versatility. So again, when you have that IQ and you have that athleticism, you makes him a very versatile athlete. He's got great hands, and he managed to get vertical against high-end athletic defenses. So that's key. That's very key because that translates to the NFL. He was a red zone threat with the Irish. That's another big win for Mitchell Evans, certainly for the Fighting Irish and certainly for the team that's going to draft him in the NFL. And he's a good inline tight end. And that's so important, Coach. We've talked about that for nearly every prospect, how important that is. What are some things Mitchell Evans needs to work on?
Well, at Notre Dame, the tight end is very much an inline player. They can get dynamic with their tight end and move them around, the formations. And they certainly have produced many very, very impressive tight ends. No one will ever say that that's not true. Yeah. But he's more of an inline guy, and his route tree was pretty simple there for the Fighting Irish. He's got an injury history. Lost significant time to a broken foot in 2022, tore the ACL in 2023. Now he bounced back in 2024 and had a heck of a year.
Yeah, he did.
Had a heck of a year. But, he's got a little bit of an injury history. Not the most natural of athletes. He lacks that high-level explosive and athleticism that maybe a Harold Fannin has, that maybe a Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland have. Maybe to a certain degree, even guys like Terrence Ferguson have. He doesn't quite have that athletic profile. He doesn't do a lot after the catch. He's limited in the open field. And he's got to work on being a pass protector, because this is a guy that you would use both in the route tree and throw to him, and as a guy that you would keep in as a blocker, because he is a good blocker. He is a good blocker. The thing is, will he be able to hold up to the rigors of the NFL? This is probably a role tight end. This is a guy that probably, outside of injury, probably does not get featured as a tight end one until well into his career, and would be kind of a spot tight end one. We're looking at a guy that would be ultimately a high-end tight end two, tight end three type player. This is a guy, in my opinion, Drew, because he does fit the profile, and he has been compared to Brock Wright. That is what some people look at him as a player comparison for, as going into this draft, as a guy that we could potentially fill the tight end three role with, with a day three selection, because I think that's where he goes. Perhaps the latter parts of day two, but likely fourth round or later.
Yeah.
And fulfill that spot. That's where I could see the Lions being interested in Mitchell Evans, just because of what he could bring to the table, and they know what they could get with a guy like Mitchell Evans. But I think that's what we're looking at with Mitchell Evans, is an early day three guy that will be a good role-playing tight end in the NFL.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Coach. We got a couple of dark horse candidates we're going to cover here in the next few minutes. First, Luke Lachey, out of the University of Iowa, tight end U, so to speak, 6'6", 247-pound senior. He's out of Grandview Heights, Ohio. He's a four-star recruit. He was a two-way starter in high school and his football team there. That was outstanding. He started 3 games in 2021. He had 6 starts in 2022 for the Hawkeyes, and he missed most of 23 with an injury in week 3. But he was named a Big Ten Distinguished Scholar. He's the son. He's a blue blood son of former NFL star Jim Lachey. Coach, he's got good hands. He's reliable. His catch radius is there, and he demonstrates good body control. He's got a good football IQ. He's really good at recognizing zone coverage and exploiting it. He showed that at Iowa. It's on the tape. Take a look at it, folks. And he works hard and is very coachable. A lot of things to like about Luke Lachey. The weakness is he doesn't have that elite speed. Now, he did have a 4.72 40 time. Not bad, but not exactly gonna stretch the field in the NFL, so to speak. And he needs to refine his blocking. That ankle injury in 2023, is it a concern? His injury history is definitely a concern. He needs to demonstrate a better route tree repertoire. I think Luke Lachey is definitely going to get drafted, Coach, and definitely a day 3 guy, possibly 5th round, maybe late 5th round. But there's a lot to like about him. What about our last dark horse candidate?
Well, the other one that we have is a guy that moved from wide receiver to tight end and really can kind of play both as a hybrid. We're talking about Oronde Gadsden II, 6'5", 236-pound junior out of Syracuse. He's a 3-star out of Miramar, Florida. He moved to tight end in 2022. As a sophomore, he set the receptions and receiving yards records at Syracuse as a wide receiver. So this is a guy that's very, very unique. I mean, he was a prolific wide receiver early in his career, moved to tight end. And we're talking about a place that, is got some football players. He was a football and track background in high school. He was first team all ACC in 2022, had that Liz Frank foot injury in 2023. He has run a 4.5 40. So this is a guy that's a little bit of a different athletic profile that way. Great athlete for his size. He's going to really be a nightmare for a lot of, early on in preseason for linebackers and safeties at rookie camp, because he's going to be a mismatch. He's going to do a lot of things that way. He's got good hands. He's got wide receiver body control. He's really a receiver and a tight end frame. He can line up anywhere. He's a alignment versatile guy. He's a good route runner, and he can get a lot of yards after the catch. So we've talked about that all day long. He's got all of those skills. Does not have that ideal physicality to be an inline tight end on an every down basis. Needs to work on that. needs to work on that. He's only played 2 seasons in his career as a tight end. He's a sub-package guy. He is kind of that guy you're going to do some different things with and couldn't put his hand in the ground, but has got a little bit of work to do as a blocker yet, Drew.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why really we listed him, because if you're looking for that mismatch guy, that matchup nightmare, that's the guy. But if you're looking for a true inline tight end, that's probably Oronde Gadsden. The second is probably not the guy you're going to go at, but lots to like about his physicality. Coach, great job as always covering this position group tight ends today. Everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to check us out every Saturday night at 7 p.m. on the ESEN Network Roku channel. For Coach Andy Shield, Marine City Mariners, I'm Drew. Take care, everybody. We will talk to you soon. This has been the Sports Peninsula Podcast. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Follow us on YouTube so you don't miss an episode at the Sports Peninsula Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter X. Just look for @SportsP Podcast, and follow us to keep up on sports around the great state of Michigan and beyond. You can also catch our show every Saturday night at 7 p.m. on the ESEN Network channel as part of Roku. When you want to hear all about sports in the great state of Michigan, there is only one, Sports Peninsula Podcast.